Humanity has seen a remarkable increase in the amount of human rights abuses worldwide, from abuses in North Korea to torture in the name of war. It may have you wondering, what exactly are human rights? Following the atrocities of the Second World War, the United Nations was established to ensure that an atrocity of that magnitude would never happen again. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was established shortly thereafter, which established a legislative framework that would act as a protective mechanism for all people. This would mark the first time that human rights were officially protected within a legal framework. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights outlines 30 articles that ensure that everyone's basic human rights are protected. These standards allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and peace. Every human being has these rights simply because they are human beings. Human rights are often seen as a set of moral principles that apply to everyone. Human rights are legally binding and contained within international law, which identify specific rights that countries are expected and required to uphold. Countries often also include human rights in their own federal, state, and local laws, which ensure that all citizens are protected. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights contains 30 articles of rights that are to be upheld, and they incorporate a vast array of topics, from freedom from discrimination to the right to an education and everything in between. To ensure that these rights are consistent and effective worldwide, all human rights have the following 5 characteristics. Universal. Human rights belong to all people. Inalienable. Human rights cannot be taken away. Interconnected. Human rights are dependent on one another. Indivisible. Human rights cannot be treated in isolation. Non-discriminatory. Human rights should be respected without prejudice. Now, we know that human rights are to be inalienable, meaning that they should not be taken away. Human rights cannot be taken away but can be restricted. This is usually only in very specific and severe circumstances. For instance, the right to freedom may be restricted if a person is found guilty of a crime. The 30th article in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights provides a provision that ensures that human rights cannot be taken away from anyone. So if human rights are taken away outside of this due process, that is where human rights violations typically occur. So why are human rights so important? Human rights are a crucial aspect of our society as they reflect the minimum standards necessary for people to live with dignity. Human rights offer individuals the freedom to choose how they live, how they express themselves, and what sort of government they want to support, among many other things. Human rights also guarantee basic needs, such as food, housing, and education, so that people can take full advantage of all opportunities. By guaranteeing life, liberty, equality, and security, human rights protect people against abuse and ensure retribution for the abusers of such acts. Human rights are relevant to all of us as they provide protections in many areas of your daily life, including the freedom to have and express your own thoughts and ideas, the right to an education, your right to privacy, your right not to be wrongly penalized or abused by the government. As per the United Nations, human rights ensure that a human being will be able to fully develop and use human qualities such as intelligence, talent, and conscience, and satisfy his or her spiritual and other needs. Under human rights agreements, governments have the primary responsibility for protecting and promoting human rights for their citizens. However, governments are not solely responsible for ensuring human rights. Everyone within a given society must strive to uphold human rights. As stated within the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, every individual and every organ of society shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance. This means that it is not only the responsibility of the government to uphold human rights. Businesses, civil society, and individuals are all responsible for promoting and respecting human rights. When a government endorses a human rights treaty or agreement, it assumes a legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights contained within that treaty. Governments are required to protect human rights by preventing violations within their territories and providing effective remedies when human rights have been violated. Human rights recognize the inherent value of each person regardless of their background or beliefs. Respect for human rights ensures that every member of society is given the chance to succeed and is treated fairly. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948, sets out these basic rights and freedoms that apply to all people. Drafted in the aftermath of the Second World War, it has become a foundational document that has inspired many legally binding international human rights laws.